Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head. This isn't just a child's chant. It's a death song hidden in plain sight inside a nursery rhyme. Stay with us as we unmask the chilling secrets of oranges and lemons. And if you're new here, subscribe to the Silent Lodge, where history whispers and shadows speak. A playful rhyme about oranges and lemons, yet beneath its sing-song rhythm lies something far more unsettling. A ledger of debts, a map of old London, and the toll of bells that once marked a prisoner's final night. Scholars trace oranges and lemons to the mid-18th century, with the earliest printed version from 1744. But its history is likely older, passed down through London's markets and alleyways long before anyone wrote it down. 2 London churches claim to be the saint. Clement's, of the opening line, Saint Clement Eastcheap in the city, and Saint Clement Danes on the Strand. Both were close to docks where ships unloaded citrus fruit from the Mediterranean. Oranges and lemons weren't just lyrics, they were reminders of trade, exotic cargo, and London's lifeline to the world. To this day, the bells of St. Clement Danes still ring the rhyme several times daily, echoing the voices of history through the noise of traffic and sirens. But the rhyme is more than fruit and bells. Each couplet names a church, turning the rhyme into a musical map of London. To children, it was a game. To historians, it's a coded soundscape of 18th century life. And in this soundscape, a theme repeats: debt. You owe me 5 farthings, say the bells of St. Martin's. A farthing was just a quarter of a penny, yet for poor Londoners, 5 farthings stung. The shame of debt was immense, and even small sums could land you in prison. The dialogue of the rhyme mirrors this obsession. When will you pay me? When I grow rich. When will that be? I do not know. Each line rings like the peal of a bell, reminding everyone that obligations cannot be avoided forever. But debt was only the beginning. The rhyme was about to lead us deeper into judgment, punishment, and death itself. What makes Oranges and Lemons so compelling is its geography. Each couplet points us to a specific church or district, transforming the rhyme into something much more than a song. It becomes a living map of London. The verses move step by step. St. Martin's, Old Bailey, Shoreditch, Stepney, and finally, Bow. Each bell speaks in turn, as though the city itself were chiming in, and each one carried meaning to the people who heard it. Some historians believe the very structure of the rhyme was designed to echo the sound of change ringing, the intricate musical sequences performed in bell towers across England. To children, it sounded like play, but to adults of the 18th century, it was a soundscape of their city, familiar, constant, and full of unspoken reminders. The rhyme's theme quickly turns toward debt and obligation. You owe me 5 farthings, say the bells of St. Martin's. A farthing was only a quarter of a penny, small by today's standards, but in a time when even the poor could be thrown into debtor's prison, owing 5 farthings was no small matter. The bells ringing over the marketplace reminded everyone that debts lingered, and payment was always expected. The conversation in the rhyme builds like a dialogue. When will you pay me? When I grow rich. When will that be? I do not know. These lines carry the weight of a city obsessed with accounts, trade, and the shame of poverty. The rhyme wasn't just playful sound. It was a reminder that debt had consequences, and those consequences could be grim. Then the journey moves to the Old Bailey. Today, we know it as the Central Criminal Court, but in earlier centuries it was synonymous with Newgate Prison, just next door. The bells of St. Sepulchre's Church would toll here, and for those awaiting execution, their sound was nothing short of dreadful. Prisoners about to hang would hear them as the last tolling notes before their sentence was carried out. When the rhyme places the question, "When will you pay me?" alongside the bells of this district, it's no accident. Payment, in this context, could mean far more than coins. It could mean one's very life. From there, we arrive in Shoreditch, represented by the line, "When will that be?" Shoreditch in the 18th century was notorious for crime, vice, and deep poverty. For many who lived there, the dream of ever growing rich was hopeless, almost cruel. The line feels like a bitter laugh at the suffering of those who would never escape hardship. And then Stepney answers, "I do not know." Stepney, home to dock workers, sailors, and their families, was a place marked by uncertainty. Husbands and fathers would leave for long voyages, many never to return. For the people of Stepney, the line carried more than financial despair. It carried the very fragility of life itself. Piece by piece, the rhyme guides us across London's landscape, but with each step, the message grows heavier. It's not just a city being mapped, it's a city reminding its people of debts, of judgment, of uncertainty, and of fate. The rhyme's journey finally reaches the most ominous line of all. Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head. These words, added in the 19th century, piece by piece, the rhyme guides us across centuries of collections, shifting the rhyme from playful to terrifying. For children, it became a game, two linked arms forming an arch as others passed beneath, until the chopper fell and one child was caught. Laughter followed, but the symbolism was clear. Beneath the laughter lived the memory of death. The bow bells of Saint Mary Le Beau, immortalized in this final verse, were famous across London. Tradition held that to be a true Cockney, one had to be born within earshot of them. Yet alongside this cultural pride was something darker. The bells, often tolled during public executions at Tyburn and later at Newgate. To hear them was to hear not only the heartbeat of the city, but also the drumbeat of justice or punishment. The candle mentioned in the verse carries a symbolic weight. For prisoners, it was the last light they saw before the scaffold. The flicker of a flame could mean the difference between night and death, between a restless sleep and eternal silence. And then, the chopper. Whether it was the axe of the executioner or the broader image of final judgment, the line strikes with brutal clarity. The rhyme ends in death. To understand how natural this image would have been to Londoners, we must step into the streets of the 18th century. Public executions were not hidden affairs. They were spectacles, drawing thousands of spectators who jeered, cheered, and even sold food and drink as they watched men and women meet their end. The condemned were paraded from Newgate to Tyburn, stopping at taverns for a final drink, their journey accompanied by the tolling of bells. One church in particular played a grim role in this ritual. St. Sepulchre's, directly across from Newgate Prison. Its bell was known as the execution bell. On the night before a hanging, the parish clerk would walk the prison corridors at midnight, ringing a handbell and reciting a chilling reminder. "All you that in the condemned hold do lie, prepare you, for tomorrow you shall die." For prisoners, the sound of that bell was a death sentence ringing in their ears. When placed in this context, the rhyme's final lines feel less like a macabre flourish and more like a memory preserved in song. The candle, the chopper, the tolling bells, they are echoes of the rituals surrounding death and justice in London. What children later sang in games was once part of the lived reality of their parents and grandparents. Even writers recognized the rhyme's eerie power. George Orwell, in his dystopian masterpiece 1984, wove oranges and lemons throughout the story. Winston, the protagonist, tries to remember the lines but struggles, as though memory itself is slipping away. The rhyme becomes a haunting motif, symbolizing forgotten history, oppression, and the inevitability of death. When Winston finally recalls the last lines, the candle, the chopper, they foreshadow his own destruction. Orwell understood what many instinctively felt. Nursery rhymes were never just rhymes. They were vessels of memory, carrying truths too heavy to state outright. By now, it becomes clear that Oranges and Lemons is not innocent. It is a progression from trade to debt, from judgment to despair, and finally to death. A cycle of life and punishment sung as a game, passed down through generations, until its origins were half forgotten, but its weight remained. By tracing the rhyme step by step, church by church, we see how Oranges and Lemons becomes a map of life in 18th century London. It begins in the markets with trade and fruit, moves through the counting of debts, passes into poverty and uncertainty, and finally ends at the scaffold beneath the toll of the bells. The cycle it describes was not abstract. For Londoners, it was daily life. To owe even a small debt risked imprisonment. To fall into poverty meant despair. To stand trial near the Old Bailey could lead to the condemned hold at Newgate, and for many, the last sound they heard was not the voice of family, but the clang of a bell. The rhyme mirrors this cycle with chilling simplicity. What makes it even more haunting is how it lived on through play. Children linked arms to form the arch, while others passed beneath, chanting the verses. At the final line, "Here comes a chopper to chop off your head," the arch dropped, catching one child as the prisoner. The others laughed, but the symbolism was unmistakable. Even in play, the themes of justice, punishment, and mortality endured. A rhyme became both a game and a rehearsal of life's harshest truths. This blending of innocence and terror is what gives Oranges and Lemons its enduring power. On one level, it is cheerful, bright fruit, chiming bells, playful rhythm. On another, it is merciless, debts, despair, execution. The two exist together, inseparable, reflecting the contradictions of the city that gave birth to it. The rhyme also refuses to stay confined to the past. George Orwell's use of it in 1984 is proof of how deeply it resonated. The incomplete fragments Winston remembers reflect a society where truth itself is slipping away, where even the past cannot be trusted. The rhyme's final words, the candle, the chopper, arrive at the moment of his destruction, binding his fate to the history the song once described. Orwell's choice was deliberate. He knew the rhyme's legacy was not just historical, it was psychological. It carried the weight of fear, memory, and inevitability. Even today, the bells themselves still ring. At St. Clement Danes on the Strand, the melody of Oranges and Lemons echoes through the noise of modern London. Tourists pause to listen, thinking of it as a charming tradition. Yet for those who know the history, the sound is something more. An echo of markets long gone, of prisoners led to their deaths, of a city that lived and died by its bells. What began as a rhyme for children endures as a reminder for adults. Beneath the laughter of the playground, beneath the rhythm of the verse, lie centuries of struggle, judgment, and death. The rhyme is a mirror. It shows London as it was, vibrant and mercantile, but also cruel and unforgiving. And in every toll of its bells, we can still hear the voices of a city that has not forgotten. So the next time you hear the words, Oranges and Lemons, say the bells of St. Clement's, listen carefully. You may not just be hearing a nursery rhyme. You may be hearing history itself, a history written in debts, in bells, and in blood.